This is a mic check at 6:08. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
This is Natalie. Can you hear me? We are already in session. Mr. St. Omar, will you take roll, please?
Ms. Fowler? Mr. Lane?
Here.
Dr. Roberts?
Present.
So what I will do is go page by page based on the document that you all have. This is Natalie. Can anyone hear me? One moment. So are there any questions or item that you'd like to discuss on 03092101 through 03092107?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to make sure that people are aware that we issue questions early and we get answers, and I appreciate the answers that I've gotten on the questions I had.
Are there any questions or items you'd like to discuss on 03092108 through 03092114? O 03092115 through 03092123. O 03092124 through 03092131. O 03092132 through 03092139. O 03092140 through 03092148. And the last item is 03092140. Oh, I'm sorry, through 49. Then we'll look at the walk-on item separately, the new item separately. So as is our normal practice, we'll look at walk-on items separately. 03092150, which is for network wiring through E-rate. O 03092151. 03092152. 03092153. 03092154. 03092155. 03092156. 03092157.
Yes, on 57, and this might connect to 56. Do we anticipate, just given that we've been living in a virtual world and might for a little while, do we anticipate some of these, the funds for these contracts to come out of our COVID dollars?
We do have the option to use it for that purpose, Mr. Lang. We will determine that once we get some better idea in terms of if we're going to be funded or not funded. But as you can see, the match is only 140,000 compared to 930 that we think the E-rate will cover. But yes, we have some flexibility to do that. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And 03092158. The superintendent's report tonight is a restart school update. Dr. Adams.
Good evening. First, I'd like to respond to a request that Mr. Lane made last board meeting. I didn't get a chance to send it to you electronically, Mr. Lane and the board, but it's a 5-year AP results, exam results in terms of how each school scored and an overall number as well. So that's the one page you have. Yes. You didn't get one? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, he was just saying I asked the question, but no,
okay, I'm
the
sorry.
answers is there.
Oh, so Ms. Fowler asked the question. I apologize, I'm sorry. But it's a 5-year AP exam results, so you can see what the scores are over the last 5 years. Just because there are a couple of tweaks that were made on the document, so I want to walk through the document with you. Just a couple of minor things, and so I wanted to give you the updated one from the electronic one that you received. First of all, in anticipation of students returning back to school for the fourth quarter, I wanted to give the board an update on the public what we are thinking about for that at this point in time. This agenda will really cover in-person, the third quarter recap, a little bit about in-person versus virtual, the full quarter plans, the detailed plans around first quarter, a COVID update, since we will be asking for some things differently from the last for the last 3 quarters. Some assessment information, which I think drives some of what's going to happen in the fourth quarter. The end of year programs that we are tentatively looking at, and an extracurricular update as well. First of all, the 3 days that we were out for the weather, which are called AMI days, the 11th, the 16th, and the 17th. Wanted to give you some idea what the ADA was on those particular days: 77.28, 71.71, and 76.53. The board approved or gave permission for us to look at the model of having kids at home virtually while we provide them instruction on weather days like the days we had. We will be pulling the data, and I'll come back to the board around what would happen last year when this occurred in terms of how many kids actually would come, so you can see what the data looks like. A cursory look at it at this point in time indicated that the ADA is higher with the virtual environment than it would be if kids were actually coming on days that were the weather related. So I just wanted to kind of give the board a synopsis of that at this point in time. In terms of the quarter attendance, you can see first quarter was 84.39, second quarter 81.83, and third quarter through 2/12, which was last Friday, was 81.21, and this is without the cleanup, without us doing a deep cleanup around the data at this point in time. In terms of in-person, as you know, for the first quarter, we had 100% of our students virtual. Second quarter, the numbers look like 39.7 compared to 60.3. For third quarter, 40.9 and 59.1. These are the families that made a commitment to come virtual. The actual numbers are somewhere around 6,000 or 7,000, depending upon any particular day. But these are the families that have the option to come in person based on them making a commitment. That number, quite frankly, is lower than the numbers you see here, but that was a number that was initially committed to be. In terms of the fourth quarter return survey, the dates that we will be sending the survey out will be tomorrow through March 5th. On your handout, which is not on the screen here because I didn't update it, the fourth quarter dates are actually March 15th through June 4th. March 15th through June 4th are the actual dates for the fourth quarter starting. The quarter ends on the 12th, and the 13th, 14th are holiday weekends, and then on the 15th is when the fourth quarter begins. Families will complete a survey only if a change is desired. So we're not asking anyone to do anything at all unless they are making a commitment to change from in-person, from addendum, or virtual. School staff will call to assist families with special concerns, our ESOL population, as well as our special needs and any other families that might have some challenges around communicating with us. It is our intent to return to the Chronos timekeeping, albeit keeping the 1 hour difference that we have right now. So it is the intent from March until this March 12th, we have been not using Chronos. That's our timekeeping system to determine when persons come to school, when they leave school. We're doing sign-in and all of those kinds of things, but we'll return back to the Chronos timekeeping. And virtual and in-person instruction will be held at the school. So irrespective of where irrespective of what modality teachers will be providing, virtual or in-person, the instruction will be held in the school building at this point in time. When families do return on the 15th to the 15th, spring break is literally the week after. We will not be doing as we've done in the past, by not having families come back after the holidays a week like we did for Thanksgiving and like we did for Christmas. And there's some reasons why we're looking at the data. We may adjust based upon the data, but at this point in time, we will not be asking families to not quarantine, but do virtual right after we come back from spring break. To that point, I want to kind of give the board a quick overview. The reason why you have so many words here is because this will also be online and we want families to actually see what we have been doing. But since October the 19th, quite frankly, we put in place a 6-member COVID tracing team, and they have been tracking the COVID cases that affect our entire school population. We rely on reports from staff, administrators, students, parents to kind of self-report what's going on and track and assign a contact tracer to every single case that is reported. We work closely with the Department of Health when we assess all the quarantines. When we assess any quarantines as needed, we report these individuals to the Department of Health, and we monitor directly with the quarantine staff members or a parent to track whether or not the individual develops any symptoms during the quarantine. We also have seen tremendous success in infection control, which means that in-school safety protocol is working. And as I shared with you at one of the previous meetings, the health department sent us a letter or sent us some information indicating that we were doing an excellent job in this space, and that's why we think we can aggressively move back or aggressive as possible for the fourth quarter. We're adhere to strict quarantine guidelines in the case of all closed cases, which is 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. And we ensure that in very few cases where we do see transmission, that those individuals are strictly quarantined so that no further transmissions can occur. So what does the data say? This is what the data said. Since October the 19th, the date we started in October, we've quarantined about 400 staff members, over half of which were quarantined due to external non-school exposure to COVID positive persons. If you looked at anything in the news on today, it indicated that most of the cases that are taking place in schools are adult-driven, not kid-driven. School-related close contacts, we have a total of 6 staff COVID cases, which are reasonably believed to be transmitted because of a school-related contact. You can see the details below. Student to staff, 3. All outside of the classroom, 1 student to nurse, which was a high profile, a very involved special needs kid that the nurse had to be intimately close to, not in a distance, but actually touching and the needs that this particular kid had. And that was early on in our process. 1 player to coach and 1 physical contact with student outside of the classroom. So staff to staff, about 3. All of these staff members have recovered and are back at school. From student perspective, we have quarantined approximately 925 students, including both school-related and non-school-related exposures. As I indicated before, we track all information from families. Even if it happens at home, we get that information and we respond to it. School-related close contacts, we have had a total of 6 cases which are reasonably believed to be transmitted because of school-related contact, and 13 due to sports-related contact. The details of those are as follows: student to student 2, staff to student 4, student athlete to student athlete 12. Obviously basketball and those kind of sports where kids are right next to each other on a continuous basis and practicing with the same nucleus of kids is where it has happened the most. And coach to student athlete 1. In total reported to the district, there have been approximately 130 students who have tested positive for COVID, almost half of which are virtual students. Again, 19 of those cases were reasonably believed are related to either school or sports exposure. Lastly, this gives you a snapshot as of and this is the week of the 28th. You can see what the numbers are on the student side and what the numbers are on the staff side. Won't necessarily read over it, but you can see 62 total quarantine, 35 due to school, 6 at the middle school level, 0 at the due to school, 3 at the high school level, and 0 as it relates to any sport. Alternative 1, and due to school, 0. New quarantine cases for the week of, and the first one was a 2-week period of time. The second one is during that week of the 12th to the 18th. You can see what the numbers are, and confirmed positive at the elementary level 1, 0, and 3 at the high school level, and 2 due to sports. And on the other side, you can see the similar data as it relates to staff. So I want to kind of reaffirm the fact that over the last couple of weeks, quite frankly, our cases have gone down. I don't want to use the word dramatically, but they have gone down as we continue to monitor, as the weather seems to be getting a little bit warmer. Persons obviously were in their homes during the cold break, not necessarily going out, so everybody was sequestered in their own home, not necessarily contacting other people. Plus, the vaccine, as you know, is being spread across the city and across the country as well. In terms of assessments, and because all of these will be happening in the fourth quarter, our pre-EOC, February the 17th, it started and it will continue until April the 9th. The state is requiring that those pre-assessments take place in person only. EOC assessments, March 30th through May 19th, in person only. MAP, April 19th through May 21st, again, in person only. March 11th, juniors only and seniors who have not tested. The requirement from the ACT office will be in person only. In all cases here, what the state has allowed is a longer window of time for the test to be taken. In addition to that, it is not going to be prescribed that certain tests take place during certain weeks. So ELA may take place in one classroom on the 30th, and another classroom, biology, might take place on the 30th. We will have to determine to a large degree what our resources are in terms of transportation to determine where kids go to take tests. So while there is a requirement to give the test, it's not so scripted that it has to be during certain weeks. Kids can take a test. So President Roe Collins could be taking a biology test and Mr. Lang could be taking a math test. In the past, both parties would have to take the same test on the same day at the same time. The state is given wide flexibility for that to occur for all of these in-person tests. Kids will only come to take the test for those persons who are virtual. They don't have to come for outside of the window of taking the test. Obviously, this is going to be a logistical piece that we are working through. Over the next 2 weeks, when I come back on the 9th, I'll have more information to provide to you, but I'm giving you big picture now. And so part of the reason why we want to have kids that we are looking at the chronos and all of those kinds of things, because we're going to need more staff available to support what's happening in buildings to accommodate this large amount of testing. All kids in grades 3 through 8 must take the test. All kids in grades in high school who are taking biology, taking, I want to say United States history, also those students who are taking Algebra 2 and those students are taking, Algebra 1 and those students who are taking English 2 are going to be tested. The state has made some adjustment by not having the, they normally have some additional items on the assessment to get prepared for future tests. They are reducing those items from the test this particular year. It should be noted that we did get some correspondence from the Department of Education today that is yet to be determined if some adjustments might take place, because it seems like the federal government is giving states a little bit more leeway in certain areas, but that has not come down from the Department of Education in Missouri yet. If it does, I will obviously inform the public and the board. So this is information as of now. In terms of STAR and Scantron, which are our assessments that we use to assess students, these assessments are taking place on the 19th through the 25th, and they can be virtual and in person. So we're not obligated to being in person only for the Scantron assessment and as well as the STAR reading and math assessment. End of year programs, yet to be determined for elementary schools. We're still working through that at this point in time. For middle, all planning some version of A-grade promotion, virtual or drive-through. And at the senior high level, we are looking at graduations taking place, and these dates I think are a little bit off, but we are looking at the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as the dates for the graduation at Busch Stadium. You have an item on the agenda that you will be approving at the March 9th meeting. Well, I think it's the April meeting for this particular item. So, and I think you read through it. If you didn't read through it tonight, you'll read through it at the next meeting, but it's going to be approved hopefully at the April meeting. Last item on the agenda is just to make you aware that yes, we are back in full throw with sports. Basketball is taking place right now. The football, cross country, and volleyball, girls, tennis, softball, boys soccer, and cheerleading for those schools that have football are taking place now with kids getting ready. That's called an alternative sports schedule that the Missouri High School Association allowed us to do. In the spring sports, girls soccer, baseball, track and field, and boys tennis will continue as they normally would. The alternate sports are sports that could have been or would have been earlier in the year allowed to be pushed back because of what happened during the fall with the virus. At this point in time, I'll take any questions that the board might have.
Dr. Adams, do you know when our staff and teachers will get the COVID shot, COVID vaccine?
All of the information that we're hearing is the first and second week in April is the time period. There's been a lot of conversation about pushing it up, but we have not had any success at the state level to change anybody's mind regarding that. But it looks like right now, from the last information I have, it looks like the April, first and second week of April.
Dr. Adams, just for my clarification, with the tests being in person only, does that mean it's only students who have opted into in person, or if I'm doing virtual, but I say
Thank you, Mr. Lane, for that clarification. We are going to be pushing every student to take the test.
okay,
The state is still indicating that they are looking at an LND. As you might not know, anything over 5% penalizes the district and the school of students not taking the assessment. The state has not walked away from that at this point in time, unless I find out something different. They have not walked away from that at this point in time. So we will be strongly encouraging all kids to come in, virtual or in person, to take the test. Whatever instructional modality is taking place now, we want all kids inside the building for that limited period of time to do the testing. So again, we're gonna work on a schedule to try to accommodate having as few kids as possible, but as many as possible, to do the social distancing, to do the mask wearing, to wipe down the technology, to do all of those kinds of things. So right now, Mr. Lang, it looks like we want to test every single kid.
So Dr. Adams, during that testing window, every building will be testing in person and kids are going to rotate in since we have to practice social distancing? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
The answer is partially yes. We will be working with the principals next week to determine their schedules. It could be that a high school, because again, we have to deal with transportation, actually picking up kids and doing this, or giving them bus tokens to get to school. And so it may be, Dr. Roberts, that a school like Miller might test the week of the 19th through the 26th. A school like Gateway may test the next week. So it's possible, based on transportation, food service, and the social distancing piece, that there may be scattered times when kids take the test at different buildings. We're such a large district with 68 buildings, and we have so dependent on transportation, we have to be cognizant of how we schedule the testing such that we could deal with the social distancing. So I will have a better idea what the schedule looks like on the 9th, that we will be publicizing to the public and working on, but we have not worked in detail, board and Dr. Roberts, specifically what's going to happen in every school.
So as you work on that logistical plan for how students will come into the building and take the tests and all the safety precautions, can you also include a detailed communication plan, so how families and when families will hear about this? Because I'm sure that, well, first of all, I'm sure that this will come as a surprise to many people because it doesn't make a lot of sense. At the state level, we're working within that, I recognize. But making sure that it's clearly communicated, and I know we're not surveying everyone entirely about how to come back, and so I want to make sure this message is clear so that we have as many students taking the test as possible so that we're not penalized, but also recognizing that something like 60% of our students are still remaining virtual, and so they have not been in a building this year, and so just making sure that that transition happens smoothly for families.
Thank you for that, Madam President. We will be meeting with principals next week in small groups in person to work out the details, but it is going to be some logistics that we have to put in place to try to address this. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda are a couple of policies to review with proposed changes. So as I mentioned at the end of the last board meeting, I am not running for reelection. Susan is not running for reelection. So at minimum, there will be 2 new board members sworn in at the end of April. And so taking a look through our policies to identify where things need to be cleaned up, as we've talked about many times. Largely, our policies are from the late 90s or early 2000s. And so looking to determine where there are gaps that need to be identified. So what I want to show you or to talk with you first is there is a policy B9353, which has been previously updated by this board shortly after we came into governance. It is not updated on the website, so I wanted to make sure that you had that up-to-date bylaw in front of you as we talk about these other 2 bylaws, because they are somewhat intertwined. So just that 9353 is already been addressed. So the 2 that we have changes to consider are 9120 as it pertains to the organization of the board, and 9130 as it pertains to standing committee. So I'd like us to look at 9120 first. And I want to give you a little context for why these are the proposed changes. So as you know, there are many state laws that pertain only to St. Louis Public Schools. How we handle our internal board elections is one of those things. Every other school district in the state of Missouri, to my knowledge, conducts their what is called the reorganization meeting, the election of officers, that happens at the meeting shortly following the election. Every other school district only elects board members in April. We have some that are elected in April and November. So reorganization happens for every other district right after the election, and they vote for president, vice president, secretary, same as us. Our state statute only says that they have to be held annually. At some point in the history of this board, it was determined that that would happen in June. Shortly after, or as we were transitioning into governance, there was a discussion about should we move it into April to be in line with every other school district. There were many things going on at that time. It was not addressed then. If we do not address it now, here is what will happen. In April, when Susan and I are off the board, there will be 2 vacancies. President and vice president will be vacant. Based on bylaw, if there is a vacancy, bylaw dictates that the vacancy should be filled as soon as practicable by the election of a successor for the unexpired term. So what that means is you would elect a president at the end of April for April and May, and then at the June meeting, you would go through the process of elections again. It's a little non-traditional, to say the least. What this does is not only changes it for this year, but brings us in line with every other school district by moving that election that we are required to have annually, moves it to April. And then essentially we would do things as other school districts do. So I'm open to, so you can see the changes in red. You also have a clean copy of the original bylaw as well. So I worked with Mr. St. Omer on this. We looked at other policies. There is a second change within the same bylaw, striking some information about paper ballots. That has been dealt with previously by the board before we were in governance. But more importantly, we cannot do paper ballots because of sunshine law. Paper balloting is not allowed. All votes must be made openly and recorded. So that eliminates something that we would actually be legally in conflict with.
I just have a question about the paper ballots. couldn't we fulfill the same thing if we did the paper ballots, but then read the results? Or I was just in another board meeting with the pension plan, and they kind of did a little ballot, and then they just openly accounted for the vote.
So previously, I don't have the date, Natalie, you are good at things like this. I'm not putting you on the spot, so you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I know previously the board has already adapted this bylaw. And so we were just making sure that it came out here. But also, I guess I'd be curious, what is the purpose of, well, the votes have to be attached to a board member. So a paper ballot would have to have your name on it. So I guess I would be curious, what would be the intention of writing them down first?
I think yesterday when we were in that meeting, it just seemed to be something that gave people comfort just to do it privately. It wasn't paper, it was that the person actually set up electronically so we could have our name on it and put the vote in, but still have it ultimately read, so. I think ultimately the idea of any closed ballot that's ultimately open is to prevent collusion between members and intimidation and things like that is ultimately why it's the case. I'm fine either way. I'm just wanting to make sure this is addressed.
Dorothy, I have a question.
Sure.
So this bylaw is the official bylaw that's been in effect for how long?
At least since 2007.
Okay, so after reading the language, are we the only ones that have to abide by this particular language? We're the only board? Or is it different?
So when you say this particular language, what?
The
entire
language
bylaw?
on this bylaw, B9120, is this only for St. Louis or is this for the entire state of Missouri?
So this is a bylaw of the board. So it was written at some point in time by the board to be in alignment with state law.
Okay. I guess my concern is I remember when we held board elections and I wanted to vote for Susan, but because we were related, because she's my daughter, I wasn't able to vote for her, and I don't see anything pertaining to that on here. But if everyone kept telling me, no, you can't vote for each other for an office because you're related. But I mean, we voted on every other issue or anything else, but I could not vote for her and she could not vote for me. So I don't see that.
So that would fall under the law about nepotism, which is a separate law than the law about the board elections. I mean, we can write a bylaw about that to reflect that, but it wouldn't necessarily have to go here, I suppose, Jeff.
That you are correct. There are statutes related to conflict of interest, relating to public officers. That's what was being referred to. There is actually a board policy, I don't know it off the top of my head, that does incorporate the Missouri Revised Statute conflict of interest. 162.591 relates to the election of officers in terms of the requirement that they be held annually. The conflict resolutions that you were referencing, Ms. Jones, are located in chapter, I believe it is 105 of the Missouri Revised Statutes. I can, following this meeting, I can produce those and make those available to you.
So that would be for the entire state of Missouri, not just for St. Louis.
The conflict statutes, the chapter 105 does apply to the entire state of Missouri, yes.
Because I'm aware that there were other school boards where that was not the case. And so when we're voting for any particular issue or any other bylaws or what have you, was there a conflict of interest or nepotism then as well?
No, there would not be necessarily.
So the conflict comes in if you are voting for someone, I believe it's within a 4th degree relative for employment or appointment. So you, unless the vote is about one of those things, you and Susan can vote freely. So to be clear, the nepotism law doesn't apply only to board positions, but to district positions as well. So it's within, I believe it's a 4th degree relative. Yes.
All right.
So are you wanting to see that addressed within the bylaw about officers?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I wanted it addressed or not. I thought that I think you answered my question completely, and I don't know of any other persons right now except for other school districts, and I won't even call them out.
This is Natalie. Can you hear
My
me?
question, if you know this, Dorothy, was just the original reason behind the elections being held in June.
I have no idea. The only thing is that I would speculate it's because it's the end of the fiscal year, but that's pure speculation on my part. There are a lot of things we do in June that it's because it's the end of the year.
This is
I have a
Natalie.
question on
Can
the
you hear
part
me?
that's not being changed. At the bottom, it says the board may by 5/7 vote of the entire board at a regular business or special meeting, remove an officer of the board at any time during the officer's term in office. It seems that we should have something there to specify a reason for doing that and not just things like anger and they don't like the way the person did this. It's just so broad. It just says that if a group of members colluded and decided they didn't like a member, they could get rid of them. And maybe there should be something to require us to have a reason for change.
So largely, bylaws are written to be broad, so they are not overly prescriptive. You'll see that within all of, or not all, but a lot of our bylaws, and certainly the ones that we've been amending or not too overly detailed, and where there can be interpretation. But that is certainly something we can look at. We would need to probably define what a reason is.
Yeah, either that or some kind of a way the board member can, protest it or something. Something needs to happen because this just, reeks with collusion of board members. So, and I know 5/7 is a good majority still. It doesn't explain why. I mean, I can understand bylaws being broad enough, but not giving, the opportunity for unfairness that's uncalled for.
Jeff, are you, off the top of your head, do you have any idea how this compares to other large districts' bylaws about removing officers from office?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't. I can take some time to do a little research and report back to the board.
Thank you. Other questions or comments as it pertains to 9120?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Natalie. I had a comment.
Understanding that I don't know if it's a bylaw, but the process is that the current board president is supposed to lead the elections. So you probably know what I'm asking. So
Yep.
yeah.
So the current process, I don't know the bylaw off the top of my head. We do have a bylaw that do we have that? Hold on. Somewhere. The way that it works, the way that our process is outlined is that the superintendent chairs the election of the president, and then the president instantly takes office as, here, it's right here. I'm sorry, y'all. The third paragraph. So somewhere though, we have, Jeff, I'm sorry to put you on the spot 15 times in a row, but we have a bylaw that states about the superintendent running it, right? So the superintendent runs the election for president, and then it's the very first one, the very first thing on the agenda. The newly elected president then runs the remainder of the elections, and then the rest of the meeting.
And that's only if there is no current president?
No, Dr. Adams has run the past 2 elections as president.
I don't think I remember that.
Are you proposing a change or?
No, I thought it was the current president ran that, and then if there was a change, but I guess I'm just misremembering. That's the only reason I asked, because if there were no current president, I was just asking I would have asked who would have led the process, but if that's not it, then my question is void.
This is Natalie. Can you hear me now?
So are there changes that you would like to see made prior to bringing this? So I'm noting, I know Donna has brought up some questions about nepotism. It sounds like that is resolved. Regina has some things which she would like to be addressed. Are there amendments that you'd like to make tonight, or what do you perceive as the next step for this bylaw approval? Do we want to bring it back for additional discussion? Would you feel ready to vote at the next meeting? Tell me how you see this process.
I feel like I'm ready to vote. I think one thing that might help in this organization bylaw that would provide some clarity is around when, and maybe we do have a bylaw about this, but when a board member's term officially ends. So is it, I know we have the election in April, so is it once the election happens, that is, once there are newly elected members, that position is vacated? Do they attend the last meeting? I don't know if we have a protocol around that.
Yeah, let me check. I believe it's that they serve until the new officer or the new board members are sworn in.
Sworn in, okay.
But that's just my brain. So I will look as the conversation continues.
Can you hear me? This is Natalie. Can anyone hear me?
Go ahead.
So this is kind of what I was wanting to talk about. Because of that delay in certification of an election, we have to wait for the Board of Elections to certify the election results before we can swear in new board members. So I just want to make sure if we have that date of April or May or June or whenever we set it, that we're going to be very specific and intentionally aligned with the Board of Elections process that has to happen through the Secretary of State, so that we know who on the board is voting for the new officers.
I didn't hear that last part, Nellie. You said who on the board will do what?
Would be voting for the new officers, whether it is the current board members that are, maybe some are leaving their terms, or whether it is the newly elected people. So I think the language needs to clarify that is in alignment with the election certification, that timeline.
So we have bylaw 9270, which is about individual board members. Each member of the board, before assuming the duties of his or her office, shall take an oath before the circuit or associate circuit judge of the city. Oath kept on record in the office of the board, some other things. So they do say you need to be sworn in. The way that we have done it in the past is that swearing in happens prior to the meeting. So that way that at that meeting, they are fully installed members of the board. But I think you bring up a good point. As Mr. St. Omer and I were talking about this, one of it's again, keeping with the idea of not making overly prescriptive, confusing bylaws. Since we do have one of the elections is held in November, we did not want to inadvertently write a bylaw that would then require the election of board officers in November. So that is why the date is here, that annually the board officer elections. So Natalie, I'm wondering, I don't know if you can pull up that bylaw. Would you be thinking that change needs to be made to 9120 or to 9270 or something else entirely?
I think it might need to be referenced in both because when you and I were sworn in, we were sworn in May. So I think the officer elections happened in June anyway. But if they had been held in April, because of the waiting for the certification of election results, we would not have been able to vote in that election, if that makes sense. So it can be loose, but it needs to somehow reference, which board members are voting, or if it has, maybe just do it in May. I'm not sure, because when you look at the swearing in of board members, it generally happens after the April meeting, or in the case of the November election, it happened in the December meeting.
So thinking about what the place that we started from was with what are the laws governing the vast majority of school districts? And there are two. For, I believe, I'm going to get this wrong. There are multiple classes of school districts. We are in a class by ourselves. One group of school districts has to do their board reorganization within 10 days of the election. The other class has to do them within 15 days of the election, or 14 days, something like that. So we, based on that law, did not anticipate that it would be impossible to hold a meeting, even if it is here saying the last meeting during the month of April, so that could include all the way up to April 30th. I think the bigger point you bring up is about who makes the decision for who is in office. And I think there are other governing bodies in our area that are struggling with this now. So
according to this information I just pulled up, it says that are we talking about because we're electing new officers, or just the new board members? Are we talking about once the transition between the old officers and the new officers, who takes place? Is that what we're talking about? Okay, well, it says that according to this, related to Missouri, it says that, and I know you just said we're in a different class, is that the old board can officially have a meeting to conclude their term, and then the new board can immediately open a new meeting to start a new the term of the new officers. So it would be like on the 13th, if you guys came and they were the new board members came in, you and Susan can actually be here, conduct any business we need to finish, close that meeting, and then the new officers can open up a new meeting starting the new board. So that the old board should meet first, calling the meeting to order as usual, then discussing agenda items and taking any necessary votes. At the conclusion of the meeting, the old board should adjourn, which means and not assign a day for a future meeting. Then effectively, that ends the term of the old board. And after the adjournment, the new members can reopen a meeting and conduct the elections and new business at that time.
So this is Natalie again. I think really what I'm trying to make sure is that we don't get into a situation where, like, let's say our intention is to have the new board members, the oncoming board members or the re-elected board members be the ones who participate in this election of officers. And I don't want us to get into a situation where the election authority, maybe the election is not timely certified, candidates can't be sworn in for some reason, and then our officer elections are then affected unintentionally in a way that we did not mean to. So I just think that we need to be very careful when we say, after the election, we have to keep in mind that the Board of Election Commissioners is supposed to certify within 2 weeks, and it almost always happens. that they certify an election within 2 weeks to the Secretary of State. And we can't swear in board members until that election is certified. So just keeping our own house clean, I think we need to make very sure that we don't word ourselves into a box where we're locking the new members out of voting because of a date restriction. That certification of the election is what triggers it.
Well, so then, thank you, Natalie. I guess by that, to me, it would make sense to have the last board meeting or the last old member or outgoing member board meeting be in April, with an option for a swearing in ceremony / opening meeting also in April.
So that is what this says.
Okay.
So it just is saying at the last meeting of the board held during the month of April. And so this is why I'm including 9353 here, because this addresses the time and place of our meetings, which is that we meet every month on the second and fourth Tuesdays. It was intentional just to say the last meeting. It did not refer to work session or regular business meeting, because that also allows for the possibility of a special meeting. And so it is just saying held during the month, the last meeting held during the month of April. So that would include all the way up until April 30th. So it does not indicate the number of meetings that need to be held or when they need to happen, just that it is the last meeting of the month of April every year where elections happen. So,
Okay. So we just then need to determine who's voting.
So the last meeting of the year, or I'm sorry, the last meeting of the month of April, in the event there was a situation like Regina described, where there was a meeting and then it closed that meeting and opened a new meeting, then that would be the last meeting, even if multiple meetings were held at the same day,
Understood.
I think.
So we just need to specify when in the month it happens.
Specify. You're saying we need to determine that for the bylaw?
No, that's just
It would be
given
up to the
bylaw,
board.
That's what we would, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just slightly concerned now after hearing Adam, is that we specify the last meeting. Is there going to be a problem if the new board members are sworn in and they come to the meeting on the 13th, and then we have 9 people here? So that so if we don't vote for new officers until the last meeting, maybe we should just make it a little bit more broad, so that, if they come on the 13th, technically you guys are still there. And I think that's what what I just read to you said, that when the new board members come in, the old board members will stay on, do what they need to do in that meeting. Then the new board members would start a new meeting, immediately do elections, and then start conducting the business. So so technically we can have elections on the 13th if they're sworn in. You and Susan would come, end any business you have to, but then we, after you, according to what I just read, after you guys, after we vote to close that meeting, the new members can vote to reopen the meeting, have elections, and then start the new board.
Well, we could, but like Natalie was saying, it might take up to 2 weeks.
Hold on, let me close.
It might take up to 2 weeks for the results to be certified, but ideally, at least what I'm getting, but I'll say it out loud, is that swearing in and election should happen within the same meeting, or should happen the same night. So it wouldn't be like they're sworn in on the 7th and then the 13th we do something, or they're sworn in on the 15th and then we come back. It should be this swearing in, since we do conduct that ceremony, or at least we have, right? So that swearing in plus elections would be a same night deal, even if it's part of two meetings.
Yeah, and I'm just, and my only concern is that if we say the last meeting, because it could happen before the last meeting. I mean, this year it could happen on the 13th and not the 27th. So that's my only concern, is that we're being so specific to say it has to be the last board meeting during the month of April, when, 13th, 2 new members can come on, and we've said it has to be on the 27th. So I don't want to get us into that situation.
I do have some concerns about B953 in regards to the oath that the new members will be taking. I noticed that in 2018, my oath was different than oaths that I had taken before. And it seems that St. Louis Public School board members are sworn in under a new oath, only for St. Louis Public Schools and not like the other members of the state. And we had board member had to be sworn in twice because of that. And so will we make sure that we are providing the correct oath of office to our board members, our newly elected board members, so there won't be any hiccups this time, because that's a serious problem to me. I was really concerned when I heard the oath, because it wasn't the same one that I've heard before.
So you're correct. The oath that covers members of the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis is specified in state statute 162.5A1. So yes, since it is dictated by state law, that is the oath that is required for a board member to be sworn into service to this board. And I believe that statute is referenced. Somewhere. Give me a moment.
And while Dorothy's looking at that, to answer your question, Dorothy was saying that the terminology last meeting is intentionally vague, because it doesn't have to mean the last meeting that we have in the month, meaning the work session. It could mean last executive session. It could be last special meeting. It would just have to be, it's up to our interpretation. So it doesn't have to be the first, it doesn't have to be the executive session. We could hold a special meeting whenever we wanted in the month to say this is the last, we could say it's the last executive session that would have the swearing in plus officer elections, and that might be the only thing on the agenda.
This is Natalie. Just to clarify.
I'm not sure if that reads that way. It really says at whatever the last meeting, whether it's executive or whatever. I know that if you say the last meeting, it could be extended beyond the last, scheduled meeting, but I don't think it says that it could be the last work session or the last executive session. I just think I think it really says whatever the last meeting is, that's when you vote on the officers. But if our new board members are sworn in before the 13th and they show up at the board meeting, we're gonna have a challenge. And I do think we just, say at a meeting, at one of the meetings in April of each year, the board, shall elect its officers. And that really gives us the flexibility to do it anytime after those board members are sworn in. Even if they're sworn in on the day of the meeting, we can still conclude the meeting and then with the old members and do a new meeting and vote for officers.
Right, but we control when they're sworn in.
Yeah, see, this doesn't, maybe I'm reading into it, but this doesn't suggest that we control when we swear them in. This to me says that they have to be sworn in whenever the last meeting is. And Dorothy, was that your intention?
So this bylaw doesn't actually address swearing in of new members. This bylaw governs elections of the board of the officers of the board, which it's important. And Natalie, I'm going to come to you next. I know you want to speak. So it's important to remember that we don't have elections every year, but yet we, by state statute, have to have board officer elections every year. So we have a number of like 15 at least internal bylaws of the board that all address different pieces of some of the things that you're mentioning. So not everything has to go into this one. The one about the oath is addressed and cited as a source to B 9270, which addresses the individual members. And that talks about the oath. There are a number of bylaws that need to be looked at. So not everything has to be addressed in any single bylaw. Natalie?
Yeah, I just wanted to, just as a point of clarity, if there is for some reason, say a pandemic or other emergency, the last meeting is canceled, there is just the regular business meeting in April, and then there's not a subsequent one for any reason. Then the last meeting would then therefore have technically been the first and only meeting of the month. So do we have some language as a contingency plan, maybe, the very next meeting, if there is no April meeting, or something to make sure that we're always in alignment with our own bylaws?
So thinking about the example of the pandemic, I know there are I don't know the statute numbers, but there are laws that govern the emergencies as it pertains to governing bodies. And I believe in this case, Governor Parsons changed something, did like an emergency order as it pertains to how government. My point is, I think we cannot make a bylaw that addresses every emergency. Based on state law, we do have to do an election every year. If we don't name some month, then it is kind of a free-for-all. So as long as it happened in a 12-month period, you could do one in April and then do another one in June, and now somehow you've met that requirement. So I think there's a lot of things that can happen, but when there are like real emergencies, we would not be the only governing body that is affected by those things. So similarly, I'm thinking of school districts that have specific dates or a number of days as to when those reorganization meetings have to happen. I'm just putting that out there that any number of things can happen, and I don't know that you can ever write any bylaw or law that addresses all of them. And to be perfectly candid, I think that's why we ended up with some of these bylaws that we have.
Dorothy, I still wanted some clarification on the oath, because I want to know which official oath are we actually going to be requiring of the new members? Because, if they're going to take one oath and then it's not official, then we have board members that's going to be a problem for. And so which official oath are they going to be using?
So we will use the one that is dictated in state statute, which is 162.581.
Okay.
Just so you know, in my case, the wrong one was just picked up. And so I don't think and I think that's what happened, that they just pulled the wrong one on their way here in a rush to get here.
No, our oath is different than the ones that they use in other school districts. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
So that's an understandable mistake, though. That's why I want to know which official oath are we going to be using?
So we will always, so this is the only time I'm aware that the wrong oath was given, and as soon as it was identified, it was fixed. There are so many laws that govern just this school district that things like this will happen. But we cannot, as a body, change state law. So for now, we need to write bylaws that are in alignment with the laws that we have.
Yeah, what I was saying, I think in my case it was an anomaly because the oath I took was the same oath I took when I became a board member of the Housing Authority. And so the public oath was just, the one picked up was just the wrong one, even though there was one for the school district. They just picked the wrong one up instead of bringing the one they should have.
But I do understand what you're saying. All I'm saying is that St. Louis Public School is being treated so unfairly and so differently than other school districts in the state of Missouri. And our oath is different than other school districts. And I just want to be clear on which oath that we're going to be giving the new members if we want them to be official and everything is going to go like it should. And that's understandable in your case, but I just think it's just been so unfair that St. Louis Public Schools has been singled out like that. That's all.
Are there other comments or points to consider on this bylaw?
I just want to comment that I don't feel it necessary to change the 5/7. I think the 5/7 is a good control because it's a huge majority. So I withdraw the suggestion of changing the wording there if everybody else is okay with it.
Natalie, are there any amendments that you are proposing?
No, not off the fly, not on the fly right now.
So what I will do is talk to Mr. St. Omer and look at ways we can smooth out this language and still. Are there concerns with the intent or like that overarching change of moving? So I hear there's a lot of nuance that we can work to take into consideration. Are there concerns about the overarching issue here, which is moving it to from June to April?
I do not, and I think the questions raised and the dialogue raised is we'll speak more to once we have this, or if we agree to April, what the process and procedure is then from there. I did have one thing on B9353, the first one. That first line has a typo, but that's it. It just says the board will conduct a monthly work session. So either monthly work sessions on the fourth Tuesday of each month or a monthly work session on the fourth.
Sure, we can address that, no problem.
Porter, are you hungry?
Okay, anything else on 9120?
I would just say, as you guys are reworking it, take in consideration the fact that we could have board members start on the 13th and we would still have old board members, and whether or not the last meeting is the appropriate wording, since you guys are reworking it.
Natalie, you have a comment?
No, I just think that if you don't mind, if you could loop me in, or I can send you a couple sentences after this meeting, just to kind of encapsulate the two concerns.
Natalie, do you have a comment? Ms. Van Noy, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Natalie, can you please repeat your question?
I can email you afterward. I had, there's a lot of echo, I'm sorry. I had just two concerns, the ones that I had kind of laid out here. I can try to email you afterward before you get too deep into reworking this with Mr. St. Omer. But I will add that the concept overall is something I'm in agreement with. And like you'd mentioned, that we had talked about this previously.
So I think the point that Regina brings up is an important one. And so I think what we need to discuss then as a board before approving this bylaw change is when and how does this board want to see new board members sworn in? I think that we don't know when election results will be certified. So so the election is on the 6th. The city election is on the 6th. Our board meeting is on the 13th. So it's 7 days. They may be certified, they may not. But because the business of the school district has to continue, there needs to be some continuity. And I don't know that we can or should, at the spur of a moment, decide, let's say on April 12th, if we get notification that the results are certified, swear people in the following day. So I think this is a conversation that we need to have.
So I'll reiterate my stance, but I'll give some more context given the ask. So I'm in favor of a special election, or not special election, special session in the month of April. It can be after the work session, before the work session, doesn't really matter. And I think the reason being is when we, like you said, there is work of the board. So we don't just show up at the board meeting and just do stuff. So there's material that we get in advance and things that need to be voted on and approved. And it would make more sense, especially if we don't want board members showing up first day and abstaining on everything, not to their fault, but just because they couldn't be provided with materials prior to. So whatever the timeline, I think if we do it at the end of the month, that gives them time to, or before, I would say, the last work session. So we open that 2-week window, but we have an opportunity for them to be sworn in and then presented with materials to be able to make informed decisions, especially if we have, especially since we could have 3 new people voting. It makes sense for them to be prepared. So I would say a special session in April after the 2nd week.
I have a question. Do we control when they are sworn in? Because when I came on board, it just seemed like I had to make some kind of arrangement with the city to be sworn in. If we can control when they're sworn in, and that we can ensure that's the last meeting in April, then this makes sense. My concern was they could be sworn in early, become official board members, but we're still operating with an old board.
I do not have the answer to that. But Mr. St. Omer and I will try to figure that out. Unless you know off the top of your head something. I didn't think so. Okay. So we will look at, we will do a deep dive into the revised statutes of the state of Missouri and try to figure out just exactly what is going on. For this particular bylaw, we have and I want to be clear about why this timeline, I think, has to be well thought out, is if there is no change to this bylaw, there will be an election in April, a board officer election in April, and then there will have to be another one in June. So that, maybe is fine, but regardless of what your opinion is on that, that is a fact, that if this bylaw does not change based on the current bylaw in effect, there will be board elections in April and board elections in June. I will work to bring another draft of this policy to the March 9th meeting, and we will go from there. So I know I've seen Mr. St. Omer taking lots of notes, and I have too. So we will address the concerns here. If we look then at 9130, this is important because I know Adam is looking to propose a standing committee to the board, and the existing bylaw is not clear in any way, honestly. So the changes that we're proposing to B 9130 clarifies the creation and composition of standing committees, how a quorum is determined, and the board clarifies the board member the right to be on a standing committee. Left unchanged are who appoints the chairs and when that happens. So I will be glad to hear any feedback that you have about this bylaw.
In the first line, full membership, what does that mean?
So it means that the president by herself cannot create a standing committee.
But it doesn't mean that everyone has to vote on it.
It means that it has to be voted on, and then our procedures for approval or our bylaws for approval would dictate that it would need a quorum. So it has to come, what the intent of this is that the proposal of a standing committee has to come before the full board, cannot be created by the president, and then it's a vote that would put that into place.
Thank you. Do we have, since this is standing board committees and not creation of standing board committees, are there any term limits to standing committees, as well as who has the authority to remove someone from a standing committee?
So are you meaning like a term limit of the chair or of a member?
Both.
So the president appoints chairs every year. So within 30 days of being elected to the office, the president will appoint the chair. So it's in theory a one-year term that there's nothing in this that says that they can only serve one term. So it could continue from year to year if the board president saw fit. As it pertains to the terms of any individual committee member, I would say that would be pursuant to the, what is it called? Like the founding document of that committee. So that would be addressed by any proposed committee that the board would approve. So when that committee comes before the board for approval, what is it called with the audit? How's that?
Renewal?
What?
Renewal?
No, like there's I'm trying to think of the term for like the guiding document. The audit committee has a really long one that outlines all the members and the meetings, and that's a different, I'm not saying everything has to be like that. That's largely governed by city rules, but something like that. So like we've even done that as we've had the mission and vision committee and the governance committee and the ad hoc budget committee have all had some type of guiding document that outlines the structure, meetings, purpose, those kinds of things.
I have a question on the in the second paragraph, where it had said every board member is automatically a member of every standing committee, period.
Yes.
Then it was changed to every board member is entitled to request appointment to any standing committee. But I don't quite understand by the president of the board. Does that mean that the request has to go through you or the president, or does that mean that only the president can add members to the standing committee?
So largely committees would be governed by the document that creates them, that is approved by the full board. The reason why this was changed is to ensure that a quorum could be established. So when this bylaw used to read every board member is automatically a member of every standing committee, if the attendance so we have 7 people on this board. If everyone is officially a member of the committee, but doesn't attend every meeting, it gets difficult. And maybe you are automatically a member and you have no intention of ever going. it would be difficult to know how to calculate a quorum.
Yeah, I agree with that part, because I agree with that.
But we did not want to remove any authority the intention of that bylaw, which was to make sure that the Board of Education had a seat on every standing committee. And so, yes, the board president could put up to all seven members of the board on any standing committee, and then they would be official members of that committee, and the quorum would be based on that. So when we look at like thinking of that creation and composition of standing committees, the Board of Education, every member of the Board of Education would always be entitled to a seat on that committee. I think what would make sense in practice, like I'm thinking what Adam was saying about we have a bylaw and then we determine how to apply it. What would make sense is that standing committee membership is considered on an annual basis as the president is appointing the chair. Then that kind of list from the previous year would then be looked at. Board members may decide to continue on or continue off, but that gets clarified. There's a list of members that we would need to take roll and to determine quorum.
Yeah, the only conflict I'm having is on the second paragraph, the second sentence where it says, entitled to request appointment to any standing committee by the president of the board. Is that the president of the board asking somebody to be on the committee, or is the board member asking to be on the committee and it has to be approved by the president of the board? And the reason I'm asking is that the next sentence says, a majority of the committee members approved by the full board shall constitute a quorum. So it sounds like now the full board has to approve all the members, but the sentence before it sounds like the president has to.
So the president would have to say, like essentially say, Donna, would you like to serve on the budget committee this year? Regina, would you like to serve on the budget committee this year? This is written in such a way that if the board president does not ask, you still are entitled to request appointment to that. And then, yes, that the committee members have to be approved by the full Board of Education. This ensures, though, that the rights of a board member are protected and allowed to be on that committee.
So if I'm understanding you, you could come and ask, say, hey, Regina, can you serve on that committee? And I say, oh yeah, but then the full board has to agree to that committee as a whole.
So what it does is allow a board member to request of the president, I want to be on that committee. And then that appointment is made subject to approval like any other committee member by the full board, but it protects the right of a board member to be allowed to serve on that committee.
Okay, I understand the intent now. I'm not sure if it reads that clearly, but I do understand the intent.
I see the difference too, because it's still requesting approval, where before I understand the intent of getting rid of, and we had talked about this, getting rid of the quorum issue, but before you wouldn't need approval to be on the committee. You could just be on the committee, but here the president could just say no, but before they wouldn't be able to.
Jeff, can you speak to how this would be applied in practice, please?
It's open to every board member. However, the board president has the right to select the chair of the committee. And so every person isn't automatically on the committee, but it's open if they choose to participate.
I'm sorry. The question that you were posing to me is,
No, I can't do it. Can you walk through the second paragraph as to what exactly that means in
so
effect?
the intent as it is written was to allow a board member so that the board member and the composition of a standing committee is created and approved by the full board for purposes of determining what a quorum is. Any member of the Board of Education has a right to be a member on that board, but their membership on that board, their appointment to that board, doesn't change what is required for a quorum. The comment about the language about by the president of the board, I've made a note of it to try to address that because I think I understand the concerns that are being raised here, but it is mostly meant to address the issue of allowing the committees to move forward while not creating a burden for purposes of maintaining a quorum.
Yeah, and that's understood. I feel like the quorum issue is definitely addressed, but for lack of a better term, power in the decision, the agency is taken away. So even like, again, as it stands right now, I could just walk onto any committee without having to request or make approval, which again is the quorum issue because we're all part by language or by law, we're all part of every committee. But with the change, there's an opportunity to be, but the agency is removed as well because again, we could say, oh yeah, the president would just say, you want to be on it, fine. But there could be a case where the president would say no. And if that happens, then it's completely different from the original language.
So we can work to resolve that. I think our thinking was that if there were an issue like that arose, when it came before the board for full approval, that board member would speak up and say, no, actually, I wanted to be on this committee. So there was, it was intended to preserve the right of the board member. And I think also, as I'm thinking about this or talking through it, there are standing board committees could be created for a number of things. Particularly, I know this board has a strong commitment to community engagement. And so there may be reasons that the board, by action of the full board, would not want the number of board members to outweigh the other members from other segments of the committee. And so the intention was to give some flexibility around that. Again, trying not to make bylaws that are overly prescriptive. I hear that, I think we do need to change some wording here so it's a little more clear. But those were kinds of the things that we thought through as we looked at that.
Yeah, and maybe this is a question for another time, but to your point, I completely understand a board might feel like we need to make sure this committee is majority community member. And I think that would just be, again, do we want to move in the direction of or the full board has the right to appoint a board member to a committee? Because that would be the major change, because we're moving from, so yeah, it's do we want to, because we could say that we don't think that's okay, but by the old bylaw, doesn't really matter. So I guess we just have to make a decision. Do we want to make sure the board, or do we want to put forth that the board has to approve a board member being on a standing committee or not?
So the full board is approving all committee members. So not just the board member appointments. So majority of the committee members approved by the full board of education shall constitute a quorum.
Given this bylaw, but not the old one.
That's correct. The old bylaw is a mess, to be clear.
Which, yeah, and I'm just, again, saying there are two things up here, quorum and agency. And I don't want us to just, say we're solving quorum, but also remove agency if agency, and I guess that freedom to act for board members when it comes to committee, if we're really wanting to take that away.
Yeah, I just think, maybe we need to take out the part about the president of the board. If, they can, every board member is entitled to request appointment to any standing committee with their full approval of the board or something like that, versus having to go through the president and then go through the whole board.
So appointments are one of the duties delineated to the president. And so this bylaw is in accordance with that. I'm trying to find it. Anyway, so that can be taken out, but I don't know that would change. We will look at that too. And try to make sure the bylaws cooperate with each other and make sense across all levels, because some of the issues that we have worked through over my tenure have been because the bylaws don't cooperate nicely with each other. And so it is always our intent, any changes that we make to them, that we don't create one bylaw that stands in opposition to another.
Is there a way that we can have an audit of the bylaws so that they are working and it's done by an external agency other than ourselves?
Yes, that would require action by the board. There would need to be, so I have talked to MSBA about it. I know they started the process in 2018. There was a quote at that time. There are policy services, lots of places that we could go with that. It is a very time-consuming process. It was one of the things Dr. Adams or Mr. Sano, I don't know, I feel like I've talked about it a lot over time. And it would be a long process, not saying that it shouldn't happen, but because the expense and the need for an RFP and just the vast changes, that is a decision that this board will need to make going forward, is how to address this on a larger scale. That was on my list of things I really wanted to address in the pandemic, as with so many things. Had to be the first priority for obvious reasons, but it would be my recommendation to this board going forward that is an item of priority. Are there other comments, Natalie? Do you have anything on 9130?
No, I'm good.
Anything else on 9130? So we will try to get some better language that encompasses the changes that are being proposed. The last item on our agenda is the tentative board calendar for the next 2 months. Tentative at every level. Nothing has been finalized. This is similar to what I've done in the past for the board. It's kind of looked at what are the items that are needing to come up. Dr. Adams and I looked back at the history of the board when presentations have come up in previous years. I think we looked back at least 3 or 4, maybe five years looking at that. The thing that stood out the most, I think, is there's a lot of variation in when things come before the board. And so this is a tentative outline of when things will be coming. One thing that I want to point out is that the March 9th meeting, there are a number of closed session items as well. And some of these things are dictated by state statute as to when they have to occur, personnel matters and things of that nature. March 9th will be a very long night, and so I want to make sure that we all know that going in. We will start in closed session at 5:30, as we always do. I cannot imagine that we will not return to closed session, and we may be there for some time. What you have in front of you are the open session presentations for the board and potential votes. So policy, there is no obligation to vote on policies. We will just continue this discussion. And if the the changes that we are able to make are agreeable to the board, we have the option to vote. It will be on the agenda, but I don't want you to feel pressured into voting it. You also see before, listed before you, 3 dates for public virtual budget meetings. Every year, the district holds public budget meetings. This year, they will all be virtual. They are spread out over the course of a week. 2 in the evening. I'm sorry, I didn't put the times here. The Saturday is a Saturday morning, and Tuesday and Thursday will be in the evening. They are all virtual. There will be a mechanism for the public to ask questions, as well as view the presentation in the same ones in the past. Following the public budget meetings, we will open up public like a survey, or I don't know the right word for it, but we will open up and be in receipt of public comment for a period of time. All of those comments, as they have in the past, will be given to the board prior to the board approval. Adam has is proposing the, I'm sorry, so at the March meeting, we will hear from Adam about the proposing of the standard budget committee is tentatively slated for a vote at the work session as the second night that we talk about it. The April 13th business meeting, and then the board officers will be sworn in at the last, and this is tentative on the, well, regardless of what happens with that bylaw, you all will need a president and a vice president. So what I want to open up for suggestions first is the March 23rd or the 30th dates. March 23rd is spring break. And so it is my recommendation that we move our regular work session to the 5th Tuesday of the month, which is on March 30th, to make sure we are not putting too large of a burden on staff during a week that schools are out of session. Any changes to the meeting calendar do require a board vote. I would like to vote on that tonight so that Dr. Adams and the administration can start planning. Other than that, I would like to hear your feedback on this.
Should we make
Dorothy,
a
we
motion?
discussed 2 dates earlier in the evening. Are they going to be included on this tentative calendar?
So yes, so the board in closed session is adding an additional session on March 16th. But that does not affect the 23rd or the 30th. And then the others require me to do some scheduling. So when all of that is finalized, yes, I will be included on this. Yes.
I'm fine with the 30th. So
Yeah, works for me.
Somebody make a motion to that effect, please.
I make a motion that we change the work session schedule for March 23rd, 2021 to change it to March 30th, 2021.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion on that item? Mr. St. Omer?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones, Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion is passed.
Are there other comments or questions that you have about the tentative board calendar as it pertains to the presentations or the topics that are listed here before you? So it does,
Regarding the budget meetings, will we get information on how to participate in those presentations?
well, so the board, so they are conducted with the superintendent and the finance department.
Oh, okay.
So the board doesn't have to field questions that, what you can currently attend. If you want to include board participation, we can certainly talk about that, but and Ms. Banks and other members of the finance department that are leading the presentation and answering questions. And then we will have numerous occasions to discuss it as a board prior to
Okay,
approval.
that-
Yeah, so
that
we will see the initial presentation at the March 9th meeting. Then there will be the 3 public meetings, which are the same presentation we will hear. And then it will come before us for a discussion once we receive all the feedback from the public, and then the final vote. So they're essentially, we're discussing budget at every meeting or work session leading up to.
Okay, that answered my question. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, so we don't need to approve this because it's tentative, and as we have all learned very acutely this year, that things can change on a moment's notice, but this is the schedule that we will be operating from unless something supersedes it. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. Mr. St. Omer?
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones, Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
We are adjourned.